What happens when a single decision to escape leads a young man into a labyrinth of closed doors and lost identities? Enter the tumultuous journey of Nikolai Ukrainets, a once hopeful administrator turned stateless refugee. Facing the harsh realities of Europe's borders and the haunting memories of home, this tale unveils the desperate lengths one will go to reclaim a sense of belonging. In this gripping account, explore the depths of human resilience against an indifferent world. Nikolai, yearning to reunite with his aging parents, initiated a daunting journey, which turned into a heart-wrenching odyssey. After the war erupted, thousands of Ukrainians were forced to seek refuge. Young and hopeful, Nikolai sold most of his possessions, including his almost new laptop, to finance his escape. It wasn't just about security, it was a chance to reclaim his life. But once in Germany, the promises of a fresh start quickly vanished. Reality struck as he found that being Ukrainian meant being overlooked. The bureaucracy suffocated his hopes of integration. Despite his skills as a network administrator, he was relegated to menial tasks, drowning in the mundane while dreaming of a life of purpose. Integration courses felt like an uphill battle, a 40-kilometer trek just to learn a language that felt foreign in every sense. As time went on, Nikolai learned a bitter truth: no matter how hard he tried to find his place, stereotypes held him captive. Even as he contributed tax dollars, the complex web of nationality left him feeling forever an outsider. He observed friends opening businesses, thriving. Yet their paths were paved with advantages he lacked: years of preparation, language skills, and the right licenses. While he toiled relentlessly, an invisible barrier kept him in a separate world. But home still beckoned. His parents in Kherson faced occupation and uncertainty, yet they insisted that life there was manageable, better than being a stranger in a foreign land. This ignited a fierce desire in Nikolai. He packed his papers and made the decision to return to his roots. He believed that the road back would be smooth, his heart raced with anticipation. Yet, the act of returning proved fraught with unforeseen dangers. Crossing borders became his new challenge. He prepared meticulously, trusting that this time, a better outcome awaited him. But as he made his way through Belarus, the familiar swell of anxiety washed over him. Border guards scrutinized every detail of his past, unearthing a harmless exchange from years ago, a photo message, a simple wish of support intertwined with his innocence. What appeared benign turned sinister under their gaze, prompting a barrage of questions. Why was he returning? What were his intentions? Each inquiry chipped away at his resolve, weakening the facade he had built. Amidst the cold, clinical atmosphere of interrogation rooms, Nikolai's sense of certainty crumbled. With every unanswered question came the weight of suspicion. Would he ever find a place that felt like home again? Facing an uncertain fate, he was eventually sent back. Officially listed as a passenger, in reality, he was a deportee, his dreams of home shattered once more. Now stranded. His circumstances felt dire. With closed doors in Germany and the haunting losses in Russia, it seemed that each world had turned its back. Would he ever navigate back to the warmth of familiarity? Or was the concept of home forever elusive, buried under layers of disbelief and bureaucracy? The struggle was far from over. Did life in Germany a mere illusion of freedom? As he sat in a temporary apartment, waiting for a call to action, determination ignited within him once again. Nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare him for what awaited on his next attempt. Would he find the redemption he so desperately craved, or face yet another cruel twist of fate? Nikolai's hopes for a fresh start in Europe quickly shattered. He faced a harsh realization: the world he craved acceptance from had turned its back on him. As a skilled system administrator, he imagined his talents would be valued. Instead, he found himself trapped in monotonous jobs, only getting paid a fraction of what he was worth. While students scraped by on meager salaries, Nikolai longed for something more, an opportunity to thrive. He signed up for language classes, but accessibility became a hurdle. The nearest school was a grueling 40-kilometer bus ride through winding roads, with only a morning and evening schedule. The teachers were enthusiastic volunteers, but their knowledge barely skimmed the surface. Real education came at a price that he couldn't afford. Days turned into weeks, and amidst this struggle, he realized that his foreignness placed him on the fringes of society. Despite paying taxes and working hard, he felt the sting of being treated like a second-class citizen. As he observed friends like Tata Master open thriving businesses, he understood that without connections or language skills, the dream of success remained elusive. European society was unforgiving. He felt the walls closing in, leaving him nowhere to turn. Meanwhile, his parents, still in the occupied Kherson region, called him with mixed news. Life there was steady, and while they lived under the Russian flag, they had work and a roof over their heads. The stark contrast made him question everything. Was the life he envisioned still possible? What happens next? Nikolai wrestled with the decision to uproot himself once again. Could he find solace in a world where he no longer belonged? In the spring of 2024, he made a choice. Document in hand, he aimed to return to Kherson. Despite knowing the risks, the pull of family was strong. The road seemed straightforward, but his journey into the unknown would challenge him in ways he never anticipated. Was he prepared for what lay ahead? As he passed through the border checks, anxiety gripped him. The border guards eyed him scrupulously, and the weight of his decisions loomed heavily in his heart. He felt a mix of hope and dread. Would this mark the beginning of his return home, or the end of his quest for belonging? Nikolai stood at a crossroads, a young man seeking refuge and a way back home. Trapped between borders and memories, he faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. His parents, now living under foreign occupation in the Kherson region, had made a desperate call. They spoke of a calm life, work, a roof over their heads even under a flag he once fought against. It felt safer to return to a home he had left behind than to wander aimlessly in a world that had closed its doors on him. In the spring of 2024, after much contemplation, Nikolai resolved to go home. He gathered his documents, deleted old messages from his phone, and decided to journey through Belarus, a maze of borders that offered the only access to his parents. The route seemed safe enough, from Germany to Poland, through Belarus, then into Russia, finally reaching Kherson. As he approached the Belarusian border, a knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. The guards, known for their meticulous checks, scrutinized every detail of his journey. Nikolai felt assured he had cleared his digital footprint of anything that might raise suspicion. Yet fate had other plans. An innocuous message from 2 years prior resurfaced, that of a footballer adorned with Ukrainian symbols, accompanied by a note about donations to the army. Nikolai's simple response had been, "I have no money." But to the border guards, that was enough to paint him as a potential supporter of a cause they did not condone. Questions began to swirl around him like a storm. Who are you? Why are you here? Why return now? In a futile attempt to explain, he spoke of his ailing mother and his sick father, emphasizing that their home was still home, despite the flag that now flew there. His words fell on deaf ears. With no orders from his parents, no legal standing, all he received was a command: turn around. You are not allowed to pass. Heart-pounding, Nikolai's first attempt to return home gushed down the drain like water from a broken dam. Amidst his frustrations and fears, he saw others trapped in the same fate. A couple beside him made similar attempts, the woman staunchly opting not to leave her husband behind. How many others faced a fate similar to Nikolai's? How many more stories like this would surface in the long shadow of war? Exiled yet again, he returned to Germany, now fully aware there was no turning back. There would be no easy paths to his parents anymore. His journey was no longer a direct route home, it was a convoluted path through a fractured Europe, marking the beginning of his quest against an uncertain tide. As he looked ahead, Nikolai steeled himself for what was to come. Would the next attempt yield better results, or would it lead him deeper into the abyss of bureaucracy and despair? The weight of uncertainty rested heavily on his shoulders as he prepared to make his second attempt. The previous attempt to return home for Nikolai ended abruptly at the border checkpoint. He was turned back, a firm "you are forbidden to go" ringing in his ears. To his dismay, he later learned that he wasn't alone in his plight. A young couple faced the same fate. The wife, desperate and unwavering, proclaimed, "I will not leave without my husband." In that split second, their hope dimmed under the weight of bureaucracy and despair. Now, faced with a restrictive reality, Nikolai returned to Germany, a refugee stripped of hope. He didn't run from danger, but had nowhere to call home. The road to his heart's desire now twisted through Europe, embroiled in endless paperwork and red tape. Living in a cramped apartment, he attended integration courses, grappling with a new language while anxiously awaiting news. Life felt like a heavy burden pressing down, but he refused to give in. Determination ignited within him. This time, he would be ready. Consulting a lawyer, he prepared meticulously, gathering insights from his parents who had already adapted to their circumstances under Russian authority. They had received their passports and pensions, and the official word from the authorities muttered dishearteningly, "Forbidden to eat." Yet, he held on to hope, believing the second chance would be successful. Guided by his lawyer, Nikolai plotted a safer route through Poland and Kazakhstan, the path seeming serene and promising. With a friend in Almaty offering support, he secured a seasonal job as a salesman, planning each step carefully. He even arranged a solid contract in Volgograd, believing he was finally on track. But the tranquility shattered upon his arrival at Sheremetyevo airport. From 10 at night, through the hours of silence, he waited, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds, his heart heavy with uncertainty. Other travelers passed through, eager to reunite with loved ones, while he remained trapped in limbo. When he faced the last officer, everything shifted. Questions began with the routine checks, but then took a dark turn. "Why do you like the Russians so much?" the officer pressed, referencing something hidden in his phone. Each interrogation felt like a tightening noose, as Nikolai realized how fragile his freedom truly was. Would he escape the scrutiny, or would the walls of a new prison close in around him once more? Nikolai had reached another dead end. After passing a facial scan at a police station, he signed a document, thinking he had nothing to fear. Yet, when questioned by an officer, the situation spiraled. "Why do you support Russia?" he was asked, though he didn't remember ever expressing opinions. The officer displayed evidence through his phone, something Nikolai couldn't see. It was all a blur to him. "I dislike no one," he replied. "I don't even have Facebook. I don't recall." But the officer merely glanced at him, deciding to open a case against him. Taken to a different room, the atmosphere shifted. Questions poured in. Who was his family? Why had he fled? The room was dim, heavy with the tension of uncertainty. As he waited in the corridor, his mind wandered to the sweet scent of chocolate bars being sold from a nearby machine, an impossible luxury for him. He had no cash, only debit cards. Minutes dragged into hours. Finally, another officer summoned him. "You must be weary. Speak with Zanev," he instructed, soft but severe. What followed was the typical play of good cop versus bad cop. They drilled him relentlessly about his past addresses, family, and motivations. He responded truthfully, yet the weight of impending doom hung thick in the air. Hours later, as dusk settled, they told him to wait. Anxiety twisted in his stomach. Did he have answers? Would he ever go home? "If you've come here, you're stuck," came the hard truth from the officer. He understood then, escape was futile. That evening he was placed on a return flight, not as a passenger but as a marked departure, his dignity stripped. Upon landing, he encountered more rigid border control. Questions about his travels dragged on for 2 agonizing hours until, finally, he was released. Yet, his troubles continued. Once again, a wall had risen in front of him. He had lost access to his German bank account and everything else. €600 frozen. When would it end? Nikolai felt lost in a labyrinth of bureaucracy, unable to escape the hurdles set before him. As he reflected on his recent attempts, memories surfaced, the familiar sound of clattering keys as he worked to build networks as a system administrator, the comforting hum of a functioning server. Each sound now reminded him of opportunity lost, of the freedom that slipped through his fingers like sand. How did a young man retreat to mere existence, surrounded by borders that seemed to close in tighter every day? Nikolai sat in a rented room in Germany. The walls closed in around him, echoing loneliness. There he pondered a new plan. "I must try again," he thought, fear battling against the spark of hope in his weary heart. But how? With his parents' call ringing in his mind, their home stood under an unfamiliar flag. Nikolai resolved to navigate the perilous route back through Belarus, hopeful yet uncertain. What awaited him at the other end? Would he be welcomed home or met with condemnation? His determination flared like the flickering candle in the dim room, bright yet fragile. Only time would tell if the journey to reclaim his past would lead to salvation or further imprisonment in this world of shifting alliances and eternal distrust. After Nikolai's failed second attempt to return home, dashed hopes lingered like a bitter aftertaste, a currency frozen in his account worth €600. Blocked by German banks suspecting fraud, he found himself stranded without cash or access to his funds, turning what seemed like a simple journey back to family into an insurmountable wall. The Kazakh border guards had questioned him incessantly, their sterile voices echoing in dimly lit rooms, the sharp scent of disinfectant mixing with the stale air of interrogation. Questions swirled in his mind. Why was every path to the Kherson region barred, door after door slamming shut? Why did he feel like a ghost haunting the edges of the world? Adrift in Sheremetyevo airport, time stretched painfully from midnight until dawn, Nikolai's hands numb from gripping his worn backpack, the cold marble floor pressing against his spine. Phone calls to family echoed unanswered, each ring amplifying the silence of isolation. Politely smiled upon by passing travelers, yet singled out, he sensed the gaze of suspicion, Russians and others flowing through checkpoints while Ukrainians lingered. Suddenly, a minor check escalated and officers scanned his face, then escorted him to a stark cell. "Why do you love Russia so much?" the major barked, shoving a phone screen close, glinting with old messages. Nikolai stammered denials, sweat beading on his brow, the officer's cologne sharp and overpowering. Unfamiliar images flickered, footballers bearing Ukrainian symbols, a casual donation note buried in time. "You don't remember," the man sneered, slamming a file down. Humiliating Nikolai with the absurdity of forgotten trifles, branding him a threat. Twist after twist unraveled, evil cop, good cop, questions probing birthplaces, lives left behind. By morning, fate sealed the door to Russia locked, deportation looming without a word of explanation. Return to Karaganda, Kazakhstan, border agents probed anew, whereabouts, durations? 2 grueling hours passed, suspicion thickening like fog in the room. Finally released, he limped back, jobless, penniless, his German card frozen. A bank letter accused him of deceit, account locked solid at €600. No withdrawals possible. Thus crumbled his desperate bid for home. Now, nowhere felt like refuge. Stripped of home, nation, even savings, Nikolai drifted, the world's systems fencing him out entirely. Expelled from Sheremetyevo, he entered a limbo in Kazakhstan, specifically Almaty, renting a cramped room in a distant district, echoes of dripping faucets and distant traffic haunting his nights. Bare essentials gone, identity papers frayed, finances evaporated, existence narrowed to survival scraps. Work eluded him, his Ukrainian passport rejected everywhere. Need VNG or local ENN, clerks demanded indifferently, barring entry from formal jobs. Unofficial gigs paid pennies, if at all. He scavenged daily tasks, hauling wagons under a scorching sun, wiping wires slick with grime, earth caking his fingers, sweat stinging his eyes, a relentless game of enduring hunger and exhaustion. Blocked German account taunted him, no proof of funds left. Accessing aid required traveling to a job center 1,000 kilometers away. Ticketless. With €600 trapped digitally, starvation loomed. He visited Kazakh banks, presenting his Ukrainian citizenship, a passport stamped with Kherson origins. Bank tellers scrutinized him warily, whispering consultations, before delivering refusals with icy apologies. Due to wartime territories, one murmured, her pen tapping like judgment. Even in the 9th attempt, across Almaty banks, denial reigned. Solidarity among institutions thwarted him. Nikolai grasped it then, ostracized by Europe as a burden, Russia as a deserter, Ukraine as forgotten kin, even neutral Kazakhstan shunned him via banking sanctions. Sustaining on friends' charity, small transfers crawled in via a roommate's card, covering meals or rent fragments. But mercy dwindled. Each dawn brought terror's chill. What if tomorrow's lifeline snapped? The empty bedroom stared back, windows fogged with despair, the rustle of unanswered prayers filling the void.
Hunger gnawed away dignity, smells of cheap instant noodles clinging to his clothes.
Friends' generosity faded quickly, forcing brutal choices, skip meals, beg favors, stare at walls dreaming of Kerson's stifling embrace. Why punish a son yearning for sick parents? This system's cruelty twisted the knife deeper, opponents and bureaucracy reveling in his humiliation. Sitting alone at dusk, cigar smoke curling in the air or wafting from neighbors, Nikolai pondered the chaos engulfing exiled Ukrainians. Shocking truth emerged, filtration barriers spiraled tighter, rejecting kin like him in staggering waves. What power humbled strong wills at borders of wire and suspicion? Unexpectedly, whispers hinted at underground paths, risky crossings, smugglers' fees sky high, but despair outweighed hope. Cliffhanger loomed. What gamble awaited next, as darkness fell and survival's weight crushed him, pushing toward one final, frantic decision? He was blocked, rejected, stranded once more. Deported from Russia, maps frozen by banks in Kazakhstan. Relying on scraps of goodwill from friends, small transfers hidden in a roommate's account, a few paid nights in a shared room. But the handouts were fleeting, unreliable. Each sunrise brought the same dread. What if no one carried him tomorrow? Would the makeshift lifeline snap, leaving him utterly adrift? Can you imagine losing your homeland twice over? One betrayal after another, leaving a man broken on the edge of nowhere? Here's a truth that will rock you: even as borders slam shut, forgotten souls like Nikolai are judged by ghosts of their past posts and likes, 2 or 3 years old, deciding if they deserve a bed or a deportation plane, hands cuffed, dreams handcuffed alongside. Nikolai ekes out his nights in a cramped room, the air thick with faint spices from street vendors below, sounds of honking rickshaws fading into murmurs of neighbors arguing in tongues he barely grasps. He stares through smeared windows at the dusty Almaty skyline, lights flickering like false promises, heart pounding against the rough brick wall he leans on. "Why me?" he whispers, the words tasting bitter, like stale bread. Just home, not Germany, not Europe, the place of his roots. The path now snakes through brutal filtration camps, barbed gates locked forever. This tale unfolds for an everyman, no diplomat, no zealot, no sniper. Caught in limbo between 3 shattered worlds. Western doors bolted against him. Russian walls impenetrable. Ukrainian memory erased. Thousands trapped like Nikolai. Suspended in bureaucracy's cold web, papers fluttering, borders heaving, laws twisting. Neither foe nor savior, simply yearning for thresholds to crack open. What became of the vaunted checkpoints? So sterile on paper, yet a frenzy of human judges swarming airports and crossings, dredging phones for ancient messages, vetting likes from forgotten summers. Each subject, flesh and blood, mothers left behind, kids waving in videos, homes claimed by alien flags. Nikolai hunkers in this rent-scrounged bolt hole in Kazakhstan, wallet empty, work prospects vaporous, tomorrow a riddle wrapped in choking uncertainty. One anchor remains, faint hope he isn't swallowed whole. If you're watching this from Almaty's winding alleys, we've his fate. Comment how to lift him. A tip? A listen? Spill ideas below for Nikolai's rescue. And etch this in mind, while the powerful duel on stages, ordinary folk claw at mere survival. This is the raw underbelly of conflict. Lives ensnared by the wires of their own hearts. Do you dare peek deeper into this abyss? Picture the triumph, the agonizing dread. Could a tiny flame of loyalty ignite a global backlash against the exilers? In the gathering twilight, as Nikolai's worn fingers trace cracks in the plaster, the room's chill seeping into his bones like betrayal's icy grip, a knock echoes. Not wind. Not fate. His phone vibrates, a message from an old name? Eyes wide, he opens it. Not a friend. Not aid. The Kherson region authorities, his home under that star, have filed notice. A deal struck through shadows. His parents, bound by necessity, traded his return for amnesty. But for him? A death warrant, thinly veiled as loyalty. Finus, or rebirth in chains. As Kazakh skies erupt in international outrage, Nikolai vanishes, not deported, but claimed in an unholy pact. The twist: his own flesh whisperers sold him out, proving no border scar hurts like a family's knife.
Will you stand witness to these forgotten flames, or let the embers die? Nikolai found himself thrust into darkness once more, a victim of a relentless cycle of rejection and despair.
Deported from Russia, his identity languished in the shadows, bank accounts in Kazakhstan frozen and lifeless. Each day, he clung to the fading kindness of friends who transferred small sums to a roommate's account or covered his meager living expenses. Yet, he awoke each morning gripped by one chilling thought: what if tomorrow no one would reach out to him? Imagine losing your homeland twice. Betrayed repeatedly, a man stands broken on the precipice of nothingness. Here's a truth that will shatter you. As borders slam shut, the forgotten are scrutinized by the ghosts of their social media posts from years prior determining their fate. Nikolai spent sleepless nights in a cramped room, the air saturated with spices from street vendors below. The cacophony of honking rickshaws intertwined with the heated discussions of neighbors, foreign tongues wrapping around him like chains. Peering through grimy windows at the dusty skyline of Almaty, flickering lights danced like hollow promises. A lump formed in his throat as he whispered, "Why me?" The words tasted bitter, like stale bread. This wasn't home. Germany felt a lifetime away. The roads wound through the brutal reality of filtration camps, where every gate was locked tighter than a tomb. Nikolai's story echoes that of countless others, ordinary people trapped in a brutal limbo, where Western doors are relentlessly shut, Russian walls stand impenetrable, and his Ukrainian essence is all but forgotten. Thousands, like him, become tangled in a web of bureaucratic cruelty, their lives governed by fluttering papers, shifting borders, and laws that twist like a serpent. Neither friend nor foe, they yearn for a chance to break free, to find some light beyond the suffocating barriers. What became of the much-lauded checkpoints? They seemed sterile on paper, yet were chaotic battlegrounds for human judges, rifling through phones for remnants of ancient messages and forgotten photos, the ghosts of those left behind. Nikolai huddled in his rundown apartment in Kazakhstan, his wallet empty and work prospects evaporating like morning fog. Each new dawn loomed as a riddle, shrouded in choking uncertainty. All he had left was the faint flicker of hope that he wouldn't be swallowed whole. If you're tuning in from the crowded alleys of Almaty, consider how you could weave destiny's thread for Nikolai. A small tip? A listening ear? Share your thoughts below. Every idea matters in this fight for survival. As the powerful engage in their duels, it's the common people who endure the harsh reality. This is the gritty underbelly of conflict, where lives become ensnared within the wires of their own hearts. Do you dare to delve deeper into this abyss? Picture the triumph and the gut-wrenching dread. Could the flicker of loyalty ignite a blazing global response against those fueling exile? As dusk swallowed the room, Nikolai's weary fingers traced invisible cracks in the plaster. The chill seeped into him like a betrayal he could not shake. Then came a knock. Not the wind. Not destiny. His phone buzzed, a message from a familiar name. Heart racing, he opened it, wary yet hopeful. It wasn't a friend, it was a message from the authorities in Kherson, the land he once called home. In whispers through shadow, his parents had struck a perilous deal, trading his return for their own amnesty. But for him? It felt like receiving a death sentence, hidden beneath the guise of loyalty. Finesse, or a rebirth bound in chains. Amidst the rising outrage in Kazakhstan, Nikolai faded from sight, not deported, but ensnared in a pact darker than night. The twist? His closest kin had betrayed him, proving that no wound cuts deeper than the knife of family. Will you bear witness to these flickering flames of forgotten souls, or allow their embers to die out in the silence?